Do what the 99% are not doing. Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear is not just motivation, it is a mirror that will either wake you up or make you uncomfortable enough to finally change your life. Most people will hear this and still go back to their old habits. Same routine, same excuses, same comfort zone, same life. But a very small percentage, the 1%, will hear this and something inside them will shift forever. The difference between those two groups is not talent, not luck, not education. It is decision, it is discipline, and it is the willingness to do what others refuse to do. Right now, while you're watching this, the 99% are scrolling, wasting hours on meaningless content, complaining about their situation, blaming their circumstances, and waiting for motivation to magically change their life. But the 1% are doing something different. They're building, they're learning, they're working when nobody is watching. They're making sacrifices that nobody applauds, and they're becoming someone that their past self would not even recognize. Ask yourself one simple question. What are you doing differently today that your average version from last year was not doing? Because if your answer is nothing, then you are still inside the 99%. The uncomfortable truth is that average people love comfort more than growth. They choose entertainment over education. They choose sleep over skill. They choose temporary pleasure over long-term power. And then they wonder why their life does not change. But the truth is simple. Your life will always match your standards, not your dreams, not your wishes, not your prayers alone, but your standards, what you accept daily from yourself. The 1% do not negotiate with their standards. They don't wake up and ask, "Do I feel like it today?" They wake up and ask, "What must be done today?" That mindset alone separates them from everyone else. Now listen, doing what the 99% are not doing does not always feel glamorous. It feels lonely, it feels repetitive, and sometimes it feels like nothing is changing. But that is exactly where transformation begins, because the 99% quit at the stage where results are not visible, but the 1% continue until results become inevitable.
You need to understand this deeply. Success is not built in moments of motivation. It is built in moments of discipline. When you feel tired, when you feel distracted, when you feel like nobody cares and you still choose to show up. That is where your future is decided. Think about your daily routine. How many hours do you spend consuming and how many hours do you spend creating? How many times do you scroll without purpose versus how many times you build something that will actually change your income, your skills, your body, or your mind? The 99% consume, the 1% create, and creation always wins in the long run. If you want a different life, you cannot continue living the same pattern that created your current life. That is logic, not motivation. If you keep thinking like everyone else, you will live like everyone else. And that is why most people are stuck in the same cycle for years, dreaming big but executing small. The 1% break that cycle by doing uncomfortable work consistently. They study when others sleep. They train when others relax. They practice when others delay. And they invest in themselves when others waste time on distractions. And let me be very clear, this is not about working yourself into burnout. It is about intentional effort, focused action, and refusing to live a distracted life. Every single day, you are either building discipline or building excuses. There is no neutral ground. Even your smallest decisions matter because repetition creates identity. If you repeatedly choose discipline, you become disciplined. If you repeatedly choose comfort, you become dependent on comfort. That is how life is shaped silently over time. Now imagine two people starting at the same point in life, same age, same opportunities, same environment. But one of them decides to do what the 99% are not doing. He wakes up earlier than he feels like it. He studies a skill that pays. He practices when nobody is watching. He fails repeatedly but does not stop. He adjusts. He improves. He keeps going. while the other person waits for motivation, scrolls for hours, complains about time, and says, "I will start tomorrow." Fast forward 5 years, these two people do not even live in the same reality anymore. One is building freedom, the other is still searching for motivation. That is the power of daily decisions. You do not need a perfect plan, you need a committed pattern. The 99% are always searching for shortcuts, easy ways, quick success, viral results, instant money. But the 1% are obsessed with process. They respect time. They understand that everything valuable takes time to build. Your skills, your body, your income, your mindset. Nothing meaningful grows instantly. And the moment you accept that truth, you start separating yourself from the crowd. There will be days when you feel like quitting, days when nothing makes sense, days when progress feels invisible. But those are the exact days that define you. Because quitting is easy, but staying consistent when nothing is rewarding is what builds real strength. Most people underestimate the power of small daily improvements, but the 1% understand that if you improve just 1% every day, over time you become completely unrecognizable. And here's something even deeper. The world does not reward intentions, it rewards execution. Nobody cares what you planned. Nobody cares what you promised. What matters is what you actually did when it was hard. That is why action always beats intention. If you want to be part of the 1%, you must start making decisions that your current version is not comfortable with. Say no to distractions that your future depends on you avoiding. Say yes to discipline even when it feels heavy. And stop waiting for perfect conditions, because perfect conditions never arrive. The 99% wait for everything to be right. The 1% act even when nothing is right, and they adjust on the way. This is not about being perfect, it's about being consistent. And if you stay consistent long enough, results are not optional, they are guaranteed. Now listen even more carefully, because this is where most people lose themselves without even realizing it. The difference between the 99% and the 1% is not just what they do, it's also what they refuse to do. The 1% have mastered the art of saying no, while the 99% are trapped in saying yes to everything that steals their time, their energy, and their focus. Every distraction that enters your life is not just a moment of entertainment, it's a silent trade where you exchange your future for temporary comfort. The problem is not that people don't have time, the problem is that they don't protect their time. Time is the only equal resource given to every human being, rich or poor, educated or uneducated, but how you use it determines everything. The 99% treat time like it is endless, but the 1% treat every hour like it is a weapon that can either build their future or destroy it. Think about this deeply. Every single day you are either investing your time or spending your time, and there's a massive difference between the two. Spending gives you nothing back. Investing multiplies your return over time. Now ask yourself honestly, how much of your day is investment and how much is just spending?
Most people are not even aware that they are slowly wasting their most valuable asset while convincing themselves that they are just relaxing. The 1% also relax, but their relaxation is intentional, not addictive. It restores them instead of controlling them. That is a key difference. Another truth you must understand is that your environment is silently shaping you every day. The people you talk to, the content you consume, the habits you repeat, all of these are programming your mindset, whether you realize it or not. The 99% surround themselves with people who are comfortable being average, people who laugh at ambition, people who discourage discipline, people who normalize distraction, and then they wonder why they cannot rise above their current level. The 1% carefully choose their environment. They understand that environment is stronger than motivation, so they design their surroundings to push them forward instead of pulling them backward. If you want to change your life, you cannot ignore your environment, because even if you are strong, constant negative influence will slowly weaken your discipline. That is why growth often requires distance. Distance from habits, distance from people, and sometimes distance from your old identity. Because the truth is, you cannot become the new version of yourself while staying fully attached to the old version of your life. Transformation requires separation. Now, think about your habits, because your habits are not just actions, they are identity in motion. The 99% repeat habits that keep them stuck, like waking up late, avoiding responsibility, consuming entertainment before productivity, delaying important tasks, and seeking comfort before effort. The 1% build habits that feel uncomfortable at first, but become powerful over time, like waking up early even when there is no urgency, reading or learning daily even when they are tired, working on skills when others are resting, and choosing long-term gain over short-term pleasure. Habits decide outcomes more than goals ever will. Goals give direction, but habits determine destination. You can have the biggest goals in the world, but if your daily habits are weak, your goals remain dreams forever. That is why discipline is not a one-time decision, it is a repeated action. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're literally reshaping your identity. And identity is the strongest force in your life. Once you believe, I am someone who does hard things, your behavior automatically starts aligning with that belief. But if you believe, I always struggle, I always fail, I am not consistent, then your actions will match that identity too. So the question is not just what you want, the question is, who are you becoming every single day? The 1% are extremely intentional about identity. They do not just try to do better, they try to become someone better. And becoming always precedes achieving. Now, let's go deeper into something most people ignore, the pain of discipline versus the pain of regret. The 99% avoid discipline because it feels hard in the moment, but they do not realize they are choosing a much bigger pain later, the pain of regret, the pain of I wish I started earlier, the pain of seeing others succeed while they stayed the same, the pain of knowing they had the chance but did not take it seriously. The 1% understand this trade clearly, so they choose the temporary pain of discipline because they know it protects them from lifelong regret. Discipline is painful in the beginning, but regret is painful forever. That is not an emotional statement, that is reality. If you avoid the gym today, you feel comfortable now, but weak later. If you study today, you feel uncomfortable now, but powerful later. Every choice has a future consequence attached to it, and your future is nothing but the sum of your daily choices repeated over time. Another important truth is that results are always delayed, but consequences are immediate in behavior. This is why people underestimate consistency, because they expect instant results. But the 1% trust the process even when nothing is visible yet. They understand that invisible effort always becomes visible success eventually. Think about planting a seed. Nothing happens for days, weeks, sometimes months, but underground something is building that will eventually break through the surface. Your effort works the same way. Most people quit during the invisible phase, and that is why they never see the visible phase. The 1% survive the invisible phase. They keep showing up even when there is no applause, no recognition, no validation. And over time, that silent effort becomes undeniable success. Now ask yourself, are you someone who only works when you feel motivated, or are you someone who works even when motivation disappears? Because motivation is temporary, it comes and goes, but discipline is permanent. It stays even when everything else fades. The 99% depend on motivation. That is why they are inconsistent. The 1% build systems, routines, and standards that do not depend on feelings. They treat their goals like non-negotiable commitments, not emotional desires.
And that mindset alone changes everything. If you want to be part of the 1%, You must start thinking in terms of systems, not moods, identity, not impulses, and long-term results, not short-term feelings. Because at the end of the day, your life will not change because you watched something inspiring. Your life will change when you start living what you already know is right, consistently, even when it is hard, even when nobody is watching, even when there is no immediate reward. That is where real transformation begins. Now we go even deeper, because understanding is not enough anymore. Execution is where everything is decided. Most people already know what they should do, but they do not do it. And that gap between knowledge and action is exactly where the 99% live their entire life. The 1% are not necessarily smarter, they are just more consistent in closing that gap. They do not allow knowledge to stay as information, they turn it into behavior, and that is the real difference. Think about how many times you have heard advice, watched motivational videos, read books, or felt inspired for a moment, but nothing changed after that. That is because inspiration without execution is just entertainment. The 99% consume inspiration, the 1% convert it into action immediately. There is no delay, no negotiation, no overthinking. They act while others are still analyzing. And this is important to understand. Overthinking is one of the biggest killers of potential. The more you think without acting, the more fear grows, and the more fear grows, the more you delay your life. The 1% break that cycle by acting first and adjusting later. They do not wait for perfect clarity. They create clarity through action. Now, let's talk about something very real: fear of failure. The 99% are controlled by it, even if they do not admit it. They avoid risks, they avoid challenges, they avoid anything that could expose their weaknesses. But here's the truth: failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. Every person you admire today has failed more times than you have even tried. The difference is they did not stop at failure. They used it as feedback. The 1% do not ask, "What if I fail?" They ask, "What if I succeed and I never tried?" That question changes everything, because when you shift your perspective, fear loses power. Fear only controls people who avoid action. The moment you act, fear starts shrinking. Another major difference between the 99% and the 1% is responsibility. The 99% blame external factors, society, luck, parents, economy, timing, everything except themselves. But the 1% take extreme ownership of their life. They may not control everything that happens to them, but they control how they respond, and that response determines everything. Responsibility is power, because the moment you accept full responsibility for your life, you also accept full control over your future. As long as you blame something outside, you give your power away. Now, think about your current situation, whatever it is: financial struggle, lack of skills, low confidence, inconsistency. All of these are not permanent states, they are results of past patterns. And if patterns created your current life, then new patterns can create a new life. That is why the 1% focus on changing patterns first, not just outcomes. They do not just wish for better results, they build better systems. And systems always win over motivation. Motivation fades, systems stay. Another truth you must accept is that your identity is shaped by repetition, not intention. You do not become what you say you will become. You become what you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly act like a distracted person, you become a distracted person. If you repeatedly act like a focused person, you become focused. That is why small actions matter more than big plans. The 99% focus on big plans. The 1% focus on small daily actions that compound over time. And compounding is the secret force behind all success. Small improvements, repeated consistently, create massive results over time. But most people cannot see that future result, so they quit too early.
The 1% trust the process, even when it looks meaningless in the beginning. Now, let's talk about comfort, because comfort is one of the most dangerous traps in modern life. Comfort feels good today, but creates weakness tomorrow. The 99% are addicted to comfort without realizing the cost. They choose easy over effective, fast over meaningful, and familiar over growth. The 1% understand that growth and comfort cannot coexist. If you are always comfortable, you are not growing. Growth requires discomfort, uncertainty, and effort. That is why the path of the 1% is not easy, but it is powerful. They are willing to be uncomfortable today so they can be free tomorrow. And freedom is the ultimate goal. Not just money or success, but freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom of life. Another important point is focus. The 99% are distracted by everything: notifications, social media, unnecessary conversations, random thoughts, and constant stimulation. Their attention is scattered, and a scattered mind cannot build anything meaningful. The 1% protect their focus like their life depends on it, because in reality, it does. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is scattered, your life becomes scattered. If your attention is focused, your life becomes powerful. That is why the ability to focus deeply on one thing is becoming more valuable than ever. Now, imagine what would happen if you stopped doing what everyone else is doing, if you stopped scrolling endlessly, stopped delaying important tasks, stopped seeking comfort every time things get hard, and instead started building discipline every single day. At first, it will feel difficult because your mind is used to the 99% pattern. But over time, something changes. You start gaining control over yourself. You start respecting yourself more, and you start seeing results that you never saw before. That is the beginning of transformation.
And once you experience that shift, you will never want to go back to your old life again. Because the 1% life is not just about success. It is about becoming someone who is in control, someone who is intentional, someone who is no longer a victim of circumstances, but a creator of outcomes. And that version of you already exists, but it is waiting for you to choose it every single day through your actions. Now we reach the final stretch, where everything you have heard so far stops being just motivation and starts becoming a responsibility. Because understanding the difference between the 99% and the 1% means nothing if it does not change the way you live from this moment forward. The truth is simple but heavy. Most people do not fail because they do not know what to do. They fail because they repeatedly choose what is easy over what is right. And every single day, without realizing it, they are shaping a life that reflects those small choices. The 1% are not living a different life because they were born different. They are living a different life because at some point they decided to stop doing what everyone else was doing. They broke away from the pattern, they questioned their habits, and they stopped negotiating with their excuses. That decision is not loud, it's quiet, but its impact is permanent. Now think deeply. Your current life is not an accident, it is a result. Every habit you repeated, every excuse you accepted, every time you chose comfort over effort, it all built the reality you are living in right now. But here's the powerful truth. If your past choices created your current life, then your new choices can create a completely different future. Nothing is fixed unless you keep repeating the same patterns. The 1% understand this deeply. That is why they don't waste time blaming the past. They focus entirely on building a new pattern today, because today is the only real power you have. Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow is uncertain, but today is where transformation actually happens. Now listen carefully, because this is where everything becomes personal. If you continue doing what the 99% are doing, you will continue getting what the 99% are getting. The same stress, the same confusion, the same lack of progress, the same cycle of starting and stopping.
But if you choose, even slightly, to step away from that pattern, if you choose discipline even when it feels uncomfortable, if you choose focus when distraction is easier, if you choose effort when excuses feel justified, then slowly but surely your life will begin to change direction. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently. The 1% do not rely on sudden transformation. They rely on small, repeated actions that accumulate over time. That is why they are patient with the process, but strict with their behavior. They do not expect overnight success. They expect daily discipline. And that mindset protects them from quitting early. Most people quit right before progress starts showing because they mistake slow results for no results. But the 1% understand that every invisible effort is building something visible in the future. Now let's talk about something very important: self-respect. The 99% often lose self-respect without even noticing it, by breaking promises to themselves, by delaying their goals, by ignoring their own standards. Every time you say, "I will do it later," and never do it, you weaken your self-trust. And when self-trust breaks, discipline becomes almost impossible. But the 1% protect their self-respect like a foundation. They keep small promises to themselves, even when nobody is watching, because they understand a simple truth: if you cannot trust yourself, you cannot build anything meaningful. Now imagine the power of becoming someone who keeps every promise they make to themselves. That person becomes unstoppable, not because life becomes easy, but because they become reliable to themselves. And reliability is stronger than motivation, stronger than talent, stronger than luck. Another thing you must understand is that pressure is part of growth. The 99% avoid pressure. They try to escape discomfort. They try to make life as easy as possible. But the 1% accept pressure as part of development, because pressure creates strength, just like resistance creates muscle. Without resistance, nothing grows. So when life feels hard, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the 1% ask, "What is this building inside me?" That shift in perspective changes everything. Now let's bring everything together. Doing what the 99% are not doing is not about being extreme. It is about being intentional. It is about choosing discipline when no one is forcing you, choosing focus when distraction is available, choosing long-term thinking when short-term pleasure is tempting. It is about becoming the type of person who does not depend on mood, motivation, or external validation to act. And once you become that person, your entire life begins to shift. Your confidence grows, your clarity increases, your opportunities expand, and your identity changes. Because success is not something you chase, it is something you attract by becoming the right version of yourself. Now, if you are still watching this or listening to this, understand this clearly. You already know more than enough. The missing piece is not information, it is action. You don't need another video to feel inspired. You need a decision that changes your direction. Start small, but start seriously. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Stop waiting for motivation. Stop waiting for everything to feel easy. Because the 99% are still waiting, and the 1% are already moving. And the gap between those two groups is not time, it is action. From today, ask yourself one question before every choice. Is this what the 99% would do, or is this what the 1% would do? And if you consistently choose the 1% path, even in small moments, your future will no longer look like your past. It will look like something you built with intention, discipline, and courage. This is not just motivation anymore. This is a challenge. And now it is your turn to decide which side of life you are going to live on.